If you still haven't made anything of yourself, then go out there and survive on your own. My father said it right in the middle of the dinner table, his voice even and cold, loud enough that no one could pretend they hadn't heard it. The room fell completely silent. Candlelight reflected off the glass surfaces, while the waves outside rolled in at a steady rhythm, as if none of this concerned them. My sister slowly turned her wine glass, the corner of her mouth lifting into a very quick smile, the kind of smile worn by someone who is used to always standing on the right side. My mother lowered her gaze to straighten her napkin, her movements neat and precise, as if folding it just right could somehow make everything okay. All eyes turned toward me. They waited for me to argue. They waited for me to explain. They waited for me to collapse back into the familiar role. But I did nothing. I smiled. Because they didn't know. They didn't know that I had built automation systems that other people now use every single day. They didn't know that the apartment overlooking the bay where I live was bought with my own money. And they certainly didn't know that I had stopped needing their permission a very long time ago. I stood up and smoothed the front of my jacket. Thank you for dinner. Then I walked out of that brightly lit mansion, a place where everything is always arranged to look perfect. 3 weeks later, they would step into my world. If someone had taken a photograph of the family that night, it would have looked beautiful: an elegant dinner table, golden candles, autumn flowers, perfectly rounded smiles. But photographs always lie. And my family had lived inside a lie long enough to forget what the truth even looks like. Before I continue telling what happened after that evening, where are you watching this story from? And what time is it there? The moment I stood up and walked away from the dinner table, that was the moment this story truly began to change direction. Now, come with me and listen to the rest of the story. They thought I left with nothing in my hands. My name is Sophia Langford, 31 years old. I am the founder of an automation system currently being used in the high-end real estate sector. I live in Irvine, California, exactly 40 minutes by car from my family's Ocean View mansion in Laguna Beach. At home, I am the child who hasn't made anything of herself. Out there, I am the one signing contracts, closing projects, and carrying responsibility for dozens of people those two worlds have never touched. That night, my apartment was unusually quiet. The city outside was still glowing, roads stretching on like ribbons of light that never shut off. I set my bag down, took off my watch, opened my laptop. My schedule was packed from morning to night. A call with a partner in San Diego, a system update that needed approval before midnight. No one in my family knew any of that. They didn't know I was preparing for a new phase of expansion. And they didn't ask. That silence wasn't new. It was just clearer after tonight's dinner. I stood by the glass door, looking down at the parking lot below. Cars moved in and out in steady order, as if everything in this world followed rules except my family. In Laguna Beach, they were telling a different story. A story where I was the unstable child, the immature one, the one who needed help. I once thought leaving that dinner table was enough. That distance alone would be the end of it. But my family had never allowed me to simply step out of the frame. They always needed a role for me, even if it was the wrong one. I made tea, then forgot to drink it. The heat faded slowly. My phone, face down on the table, vibrated softly. One notification, then another. I didn't open them right away. There are moments when you already know what's coming won't be pleasant, even before you read a single word. I had left that house, but I was beginning to understand my story had never ended there. And the next morning, one message made it clear to me they were rewriting my life in a way I had never given permission for. I don't remember how many times I signed. I only remember that every time they needed my signature, everything was called a procedure. In the Langford family, no one ever states the rules out loud, but everyone knows exactly what the rules are. Isabella is the one with expectations placed on her. And I, Sophia Langford, am the one who is expected to be understanding. If Isabella makes a mistake, it is because of circumstances. If I make a mistake, it is because of my choices. My father calls that standards. My mother calls it balance. And I learned how to stand in the right place so I wouldn't ruin the picture they had already painted. Family dinners always end the same way. Isabella is asked about her plans. I am asked whether I need help. Help, not what I want. I grew used to being the supporting role in someone else's story. So used to it that I no longer knew where the line was between helping and being used. There are very ordinary afternoons. I sit at the dining table after work, my laptop still open, my mind still at my job. My mother places a stack of papers in front of me. No introduction, no long explanation. Can you sign here for me, so we can stay on schedule? Whose schedule? For what purpose I am not asked. And I do not ask. My name appears on the documents, printed clearly and neatly. Sometimes Isabella's name is there too. Sometimes it isn't. Every time I hesitate, the answer is always the same. It's just an internal procedure. There's nothing binding. We're family. Family, that word is always used to shut down every question. And I, because I didn't want to be the difficult one, signed. There was one time I held the pen longer than usual, not because I was suspicious, but because I was tired. My father glanced at his watch and let out a quiet breath. Just sign it. Don't think too much. The way he said it wasn't harsh, but it was enough for me to understand my hesitation was inconveniencing them. So I signed, like every other time. That night, in my quiet apartment in Irvine, I remembered these moments with unsettling clarity, not out of nostalgia, but because they were starting to no longer stand alone. I remembered how the pen slid too quickly. I remembered signing while exhausted. I remembered how everyone was always in a hurry only when they needed my signature. When Isabella's store expanded, I was there. When documents needed to be finalized, I was called. When everything was settled, the story was retold, without me in it. I used to think it was nothing, because I was used to standing outside the spotlight. But being used to something does not make it safe. What sent a chill down my spine was not the signatures themselves. It was the fact that I was never asked again afterward. No one came back to confirm. No one sent me a copy. No one said, "Everything's done." Thank you. My name was used, but my existence was not. If those signatures were truly harmless, why was I never allowed to keep a copy? I closed my laptop. The room was silent, but my mind was not. If I really was the one who hadn't made anything of herself, why did my name appear precisely when guarantees were needed? If everything was transparent, why was every question silenced with the word family? I didn't rush to conclusions, but I knew one thing very clearly. The Langford family never does anything by accident, and if I had once signed my name on things that did not truly belong to me, then the truth was simply waiting for the right moment to be named. 2 days later, an email appeared in my inbox, and this time, no one called it a procedure anymore. Emails have no emotions, but this one used my name in a place where I had never signed anything. That afternoon passed in a completely ordinary way. Sunlight from the office window fell straight onto the light wooden desk. My laptop screen was open to the meeting calendar. My coffee had gone cold. I had just finished a short call when my inbox ticked up. No ringing, no urgent alert, just a dry subject line, verification required. The sender's name was a law firm I had never contacted. Administrative language, no emotion, no polite greeting. I opened the email not out of curiosity, but out of habit. I check anything that carries my name. The air conditioner hummed steadily. Soft typing echoed from a desk nearby. Outside the glass wall, The parking lot gleamed in the sun. Everything was operating as usual, as if a single line of text had not just quietly questioned my legal identity. The first sentence was unmistakably clear. This notice is to confirm your status as financial guarantor. I slowed my reading, then read it again. The name Sophia Langford appeared in a position that could not be mistaken. Beside it was a specific number, a loan amount far larger than any internal procedure I had ever been told about. There was no panic, only a very deep pause. The email did not ask for consent. It confirmed. It confirmed that I carried legal responsibility for a debt attached to an asset I had never officially owned. I stared at the screen as a cold sensation spread from my chest down into my hands. There was an attachment, a scanned document. I downloaded it, opened it. In the lower right corner of the page was a signature bearing my name. The handwriting was similar, but it was not mine. The curves were familiar, but the rhythm was wrong. The pauses came in the wrong places. The final letter lacked the habit I always keep. Someone had watched my signature long enough to imitate it, but not long enough to understand it. On the next page, the asset name appeared. An address I recognized. Too familiar. Isabella's store. Every piece I had once pushed aside now fell into place without noise, without drama, just with a clarity that was terrifying. I did not call my family. I did not text. I did not ask questions. I closed my laptop, stood up, and took one slow breath. Some truths do not require confrontation to be understood. They speak loudly enough on their own. I opened my contacts, scrolled past familiar names, and stopped at one number. My lawyer. My voice did not shake. It was not raised, just firm. Someone has used my name for a loan. I need you to look at this immediately. I was used to explaining myself to my family, but not this time. There are boundaries that should be built in silence so the truth can be examined through records, not emotions. My lawyer said only one sentence. Not loud, not urgent, but it was enough to change everything. He answered the call almost immediately. No extended greetings. I said exactly one line. Someone has used my name for a loan. I need you to check it. On the other end. He was silent for a few seconds, not out of surprise, but because he was rearranging the facts. Send me the email and all attached files. His voice was steady. No reassurance, no judgment. The kind of voice used by someone accustomed to uncomfortable truths and who understands that emotion only slows things down. We opened a video call later that same afternoon. The screen split in two. Documents appeared page by page. He zoomed in on the signature, compared it with samples of my signature from other legal records. Similar. He said, but not yours. He pointed out very small details, unfamiliar stopping points, strokes that didn't follow my habitual motion. The person who signed this studied your signature, he continued, but they didn't sign it with your reflex. I didn't ask anything further. I had known that the moment I opened the file, hearing someone else confirm it only made it official. He scrolled to the next page. Loan information, purpose of use, associated asset. Then he looked up at me through the screen. For the first time, this is not a mistake. This is not an oversight. He spoke slowly, very slowly. Someone deliberately inserted your name into this contract, and they did it with intent. The room went silent. I could clearly hear the hum of the air conditioner. If it were a mistake, I could have corrected it. If it were a misunderstanding, I could have explained it. But this was a choice. My lawyer asked me one single question. Do you want to protect yourself, or do you want to control the game? You have two paths, he said. One to survive, one to take power. He turned his screen and opened a very short summary. No charts, no excess words. The first path, he said, is to deny responsibility. File a fraud complaint and wait for the investigation. I nodded. That was defense. Safe, but slow. The second path, he continued, is to take over the financial obligation before everything explodes. That way, you don't just protect yourself. He paused briefly. You place yourself in control. I understood the difference immediately. One path to avoid being pulled down. One path to stand above it. I didn't ask about my family. I didn't ask how they would react. I didn't ask who might get hurt. Those questions were no longer legal. They were emotional. And this time, I wasn't letting emotion drive. I don't want to call home. I said, not right now. He nodded, as if he had been expecting that answer. Then we work in silence, he said. Collect evidence. Keep everything clean. Silence for the first time was not avoidance. It was strategy. We agreed on the next steps. No embellishment, no excess. Review the loan records. Monitor the payment schedule. Prepare a takeover option if risk appears. I looked around my office again. Everything was still there, stable, ordered. My family had always thought I only knew how to step back when things got tense. They didn't know that some people don't need confrontation to win. A few days later, the system sent out an automated notice, and this time, it did not go to my family first. The system did not get angry. It simply activated the clause, and everything shifted. 3 days after my last call with the lawyer, an automated notice appeared. No exclamation marks, no long explanations. Account status elevated risk. I read every line carefully. Due date, cash flow shortfall, collateral under review. Everything unfolded exactly as predicted. The system listed timelines in straight gray lines. No reminder calls, no advance warnings, just data updating itself entry by entry, day by day, as if every decision had been logged long ago and was now simply waiting to be triggered. Not faster, not slower. My lawyer sent a short note along with it. We're at the exact intersection, the intersection between defense and initiative, between waiting to be called out and stepping in by choice. I looked at my calendar, a gap that was just right. Not accidental. There are systems that don't need emotion to function. They only need data. And data doesn't feel sympathy for anyone. We met briefly. No debate, no assumptions. The lawyer laid out the option to assume the financial obligation. Not to save anyone, but to place control in the hands of the one capable of bearing responsibility. From this point, he said, you can step in as the receiving party. Clean, legitimate. I nodded. No further questions. I was used to papers being pushed in front of me with a casual, just sign here. This time was different. Before, I signed because someone stood next to me waiting, because of urging looks, because I didn't want to slow down their timeline. This time, no one stood there. No one needed my help. I signed because control needed to be placed where it belonged. I read every clause. Slowly, clearly. My signature went down with the right rhythm, the right pressure, like a confirmation to myself. There was no call home, no message sent in advance. A decision that didn't need an audience. When the documents were submitted, I stood up from the desk. The room remained quiet. There was no sense of victory, only a very clear realization I was no longer standing outside my own story. The system updated its status, and this time, access no longer belonged to my family. My family received the notification, but they had no idea who was standing behind it. The notice didn't reach them directly. It took a detour. Through the system, through accounting, through emails that were read more slowly than usual. When my father called the family's personal lawyer, his voice was no longer as firm as before. Not panic, but there was a noticeable gap, the gap of someone trying to hold control without enough information. My mother began asking more questions, not directly, just inquiries circling payment schedules, terms, Deadlines. Isabella went quiet. Her silence didn't resemble calm. It felt like someone counting down without knowing where the clock was. They believed this was something that could be negotiated. A technical glitch. Something one phone call could fix. They didn't know the system had already updated its roles and that control had quietly changed hands. I didn't wait for them to call me. I initiated. Not with a confrontation, but with a short, precise email. We should meet to clarify a few details. Friday? A neutral location. I chose a quiet restaurant, unconnected to any family memory. No long tables, no private rooms. A space where everyone had to speak softly and couldn't lean on old habits. They agreed faster than I expected. Maybe because they believed a representative from the lender would be there. Maybe because they needed someone to tell them things could still be salvaged. I scheduled it, confirmed, closed my laptop. There was no feeling of triumph, only a very clear sense of preparation. They walked into that meeting believing they were negotiating without realizing the one in control was already seated there. They walked into the meeting to negotiate. I walked in to end an assumption. The restaurant was quieter than I expected. Low golden lighting, the soft clink of glasses, no private room, just private enough that no one could raise their voice. The Langford family arrived early. The air carried the scent of polished wood and wine opened too soon. Nearby tables spoke in low tones, far enough that no one could hear clearly, but close enough for me to know if anyone lost control. They would be the only ones being watched. My father sat upright. My mother wore the familiar smile she reserved for working meetings. Isabella sat slightly turned, one hand resting on her phone, as if ready to leave at any moment. They looked around, searching for the lender's representative. No one appeared. When I walked in, they all looked up at once. A delayed beat. No one stood. "You're here too?" my mother asked. Her voice was light, as if I had simply wandered to the wrong table. I pulled out a chair, sat down. No explanation. My lawyer arrived a few minutes after me. Unhurried, no polite greetings. He placed a thin folder on the table. Did not open it yet. "Shall we begin?" he said. Neutral tone, no emphasis. My father frowned. "We're waiting for the lender's representative." My lawyer met his gaze. "I'm speaking on behalf of the controlling party." Silence dropped onto the table. Isabella looked at me. For the first time, my mother forced a smile. "What do you mean?" The lawyer slid the folder toward them. "The loan has transferred management rights, effective as of last week." No one asked why. Only who? "Me," I said. One word. Not loud, not shaking. My father let out a short laugh. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder. Just one page. My name was on the contract from the beginning. I said, not as someone who was asked, but as someone who was used. Isabella's mouth opened, then closed. My lawyer continued, "The signature on file is not hers. It has been verified. It was intentional." My mother pressed a hand to her chest. "We're family. Family doesn't sign for someone else," I said. No interruption. No raised voice. My father stared down at the table. He didn't ask another question. Didn't argue. That silence said more than every argument he had ever won. The man who had always controlled the pace of the table, the tone, the conclusion was now counting seconds without knowing what he was waiting for. For the first time, he couldn't find a sentence to lead with. "From this point forward," the lawyer said, "any decision regarding that asset must go through the controlling party." He looked at me. Isabella half stood up, then sat back down, like someone realizing the familiar exit no longer existed. "You didn't need to do this," she said. "You have money." I looked at her. No anger, no pity. I need my name, I said. And I need it not to be used again. My mother cried, not in apology, in fear. My father exhaled, an old sigh this time, without effect. The lawyer closed the folder. I realized I was no longer trying to convince anyone. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need their agreement. In that moment, I wasn't standing opposite my family. I was standing outside their old story. We'll send the next options in writing. No one objected. No one won or lost with words. 7 days. That was the time they had before everything moved into a phase that could not be reversed. This is not a moment for celebration. This is the moment I stop holding myself together. I leave the restaurant first, not in a hurry. Without looking back. Outside. The air is cool and dry cold enough to pull me out of the voices that have just dissolved behind me. Street lights reflect on car windows like stretched streaks of light, leading nowhere in particular. I stand still for a few seconds, one hand on the door, listening as my heartbeat slows. There is no feeling of victory. There is no emptiness either. Only a new kind of quiet one where I no longer need to prepare answers for anyone. I start the car. That familiar sound is enough to confirm it I am leaving alone. And that is okay. The apartment welcomes me with clean silence. The city lights outside the window are still bright, but they don't intrude. I set my bag down, take off my coat, and leave it there not folded, not adjusted. In the kitchen, the water comes to a gentle boil. I make tea. Not as a ritual, just because my hands need something simple to do. The steam rises, warm and familiar. I lean against the counter, watching it slowly fade. No one asks what I'm thinking. No one waits for me to explain. For the first time in a long while, my home is not a shelter. It is a place where I am allowed to loosen my grip. I think about the years I spent preparing to prove myself, preparing to defend, preparing not to be used again, preparing so much that I forgot what it felt like to stand still without being on guard. Tonight, I have said enough. And I stopped at the right moment, not because they understood, but because I understood that I didn't need them to. Some boundaries don't need to be repeated. They stand on their own the moment you stop asking for permission. I realize I am no longer carrying the role of the fixer in my family's story. I am not carrying, not covering, not smoothing over things that were never mine to hold. Letting go of control is not weakness. It is choosing the right things to keep. Family, to me now, is no longer a place where everything must fit a frame. It is a place where I am not made smaller so someone else can feel larger. And if such a place does not exist, I can create it myself. I think about tomorrow, work, projects that are moving in the right direction, relationships that don't require rehearsal. I think about the evenings that will come quiet, slow, enough. Not every ending needs an apology. Not every truth needs to be accepted. Some nights, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop and let everything remain exactly as it is. Tomorrow, this story will close not with a victory, but with a choice. This story does not end with a victory. It ends with a choice. Some stories don't need a final climax. They only need to stop at the right place. After everything, I no longer spend much time thinking about who was right or who was wrong. Those questions are exhausting and no longer necessary. What remains is not the restaurant lights, nor the words that once made me feel smaller. What remains is the feeling of the first time I didn't have to prepare an answer for anyone. Silence. This time is no longer emptiness. It is space to breathe. Maybe the story isn't really about me. Maybe it's about an evening when you stayed silent to keep the peace. A moment when you nodded even though you were already exhausted inside. A relationship that only functions when you are the one carrying everything. If you've ever been the one who is always fine, the one who can handle it, the one who says, "It can wait," know this: you are not weak. You've simply been carrying too much. Some families change because they want to. Some families only change when one person stops carrying the load for everyone else. I didn't fix them. I fixed the boundaries. Boundaries don't make you lonely. They simply place you where you belong. And when you stand in your rightful place, everything around you is forced to rearrange itself, whether they like it or not. Fairness is not being loved more. Fairness is being respected equally. If this story touched you, leave a comment and share how you feel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can share more meaningful and valuable stories with you. See you in the next story. Not everyone needs a major turning point to stop. Sometimes, it's just a small decision, but for the first time, it's for you.